A brand new murder mystery podcast is dropping on Monday called Cold Tapes. It's part fictional story, part murder mystery game, where you, the listener, can play detective. A British man has been murdered on an Antarctic research base during their winter, so no one can get in or out. 16 suspects remain on the base, and you have to solve it. Start your investigation wherever you get your podcasts. Give them a follow and head to coldtapes.com from Monday if you want to play. It costs £5 to get all the files instantly and a competition entry. If you get it right, you could win up to £10,000. Terms and conditions apply, and for more information, follow the link in the episode description. I myself will be playing along, and I hope that you will join me. Now for today's remastered episode.
Yeah. So now it's going to start back up. We've got to have retribution. So, and the movement is looking on us to do it, because again, this is our background. I don't want to do it. Jim's wanting to rebuild the army again that we've lost. So now to rebuild the army, he drops the standard. Now we're letting people back in, or letting people in who smoke, who drink, who cuss, who don't even care about Jesus. They just care about guns, racism. So we have drastically changed at this point. So one of the guys that was sort of a quasi-member that went between various groups, our group, had a plan. He was having trouble with the IRS. He lived in Oklahoma, and he wanted to do retribution against the IRS. So he took Jim down to what was the Borough Federal Building in Oklahoma City. This was previous to Tim McVeigh blowing it up in 95. So in 1983, we made plans to blow up that same building. And we were going to build a rocket launcher to be bolted down the back of the van, 12 to 16 rockets, shooting at the Murrah building all at one time, right? By this point, we had a replacement for our military leader. This guy was different. This guy had been trained in Vietnam as a munitions expert and assassination expert.
Oh my goodness.
So this puts us steps ahead now for going into bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he's putting together this rocket launcher, and one of them actually goes off like building.
Oh, gosh.
His hands pretty bad. So Jim and I both said, well, this, because we took everything as a sign from God, to be directed by God on what to, what not to do. So we took this as a sign of what not to do. And we determined we had to do something. If we're going to do retribution for Call, it had to be more personal about Call. So we decided to target the federal judge, federal prosecutor, and FBI agent.
Oh my gosh.
For the Call. So we were going to assassinate them on December 26th of 1983. So we scoped out their homes, we had their addresses, everything.
What on Boxing Day? On the 26th of December, did you say? Isn't that like?
Yeah, right after Christmas.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, because we figure nobody's going to expect it. Obviously, Christmas is over with. People are still off of work, so they're, these three people will probably still be home. Right? So the idea was we would drive up, knock on the door. If one of those three men answer the door, pow, they're dead. We drive off. If somebody else answers the door, pow, we go into the house, we shoot everybody else, the one that we're looking for. So it was bad. It was bad. It was decided that Jim, myself, one of the other elders would be dropped off in one of the towns nearby for an alibi, because we figured CSA would be looked at, right? And three of the other men would actually go and do the assassinations. So we packed everything up on December 25th that night in two vehicles. One was a van that was a stolen van. We put all the weapons and stuff in that. The other car, and three of us were going to go in the van. Three of the men were going to go in the other car that would be, we would use on our alibi trip. Well, the town that we were going to in Arkansas was about 4 hours away. We got up on Sunday morning and it had snowed. And snow was not even predicted to happen. We get up there, so on the ground. And Jim and I are looking at each other and goes, well, this is kind of interesting. What are we going to do now? I just decided we'd go on. I'd take it longer to get there, but we'll go on. About halfway there.
Don't take everything as a sign and then on this day ignore the signs. Why?
Yeah, I know. So, but we get there about halfway there. I mean, Arkansas is real hilly, right? So you can't drive very fast anyway. And then you got snow on top of that. And the driver, I felt like was driving a little too fast. So I told Jim, I said, this guy needs to slow down. Jim said, okay. Tells the guy to slow down. Oh, I got it. Older man. And it wasn't 5 minutes later. We're going around a curve, and there's another couple coming around in a pickup into our lane. We run head on into them. So both vehicles can't go now. So we're stopped.
Is everybody okay?
Everybody's okay. I had to get out and go to the other couple to make sure they were okay, while the other guys took all the guns out of the van and put it to the car. And then the guys in the car, 4 of them left, leaving me and the driver of the car, of our van, still there, waiting for cops, because people who drove by said, hey, as soon as I get, because you don't have cell phones in those days, as soon as I get to a payphone, I'll call the cops and they'll come out here. So, of course, me and the other guy, we know the van's stolen. So we're just praying that cops don't look at the VIN number, run the VIN number. But the cops get there, do their report, blame the other couple because they were in our lane. It was obvious. Didn't look at the VIN numbers, and both vehicles were towed into town. By this point, Jim and the other 3 guys came in the car and found us. The 4 of the guys wanted to go on and do the mission. Jim and I just said no. This was an obvious sign from God for us that we're not supposed to do this kind of stuff. So this is December 1983. And at that point, once the route we knew we weren't going to do anything, we were pretty much written off. What happened, I'll back a little bit. In 1983, when we had our split, some of the paramilitary people from our group merged with some people who left area nations and formed what they called the Order. Are you familiar with the Order?
No.
Okay. The Order was it was a cell group of extremists who wanted to overthrow the government, and they were going to counterfeit money, rob armored cars for money. They killed a Jewish talk show host. We did a lot of bad stuff. They stole millions of dollars. Well, by 1980, the fall of 84, they started getting busted. And of course, as always happens, people started turning state's evidence. So some of our former members, we discovered, were turning state's evidence against us. So once 83 was gone, the Order's forming now. By the end of 84, this is starting to fall apart for the Order, and means we're going to probably fall apart pretty soon. So by January 1985, we start hearing things in the news and other groups of people turning state's evidence, and we think it's pretty likely we're going to be charged with something by the government pretty soon. I'm concerned with, of course, Jim is, again, we're letting people come in who don't have a standard, just want war. Jim's preparing for war. He doesn't care if the government comes in.
Oh, gosh. This is starting to sound like the Branch Davidians as well. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. So,
unknown to Jim, I had met in summer of 83. A two-man team and introduced themselves to me while I was in town one day. And they were an ATF agent and a Arkansas State police officer, right? No threatening, just talking to me. Just say, we want to introduce ourselves. If you ever need someone to talk to, we'll be here. You can talk to us. Okay, fine. I don't know anything to talk about, but okay. Well, once all the other stuff started happening, and then 84, we started realizing people were turning state's evidence. In February of 85, I go to the Arkansas State police officer. And I said, look, if there's ever a warrant comes down on Jim, come tell me first. Don't let the government come and force. Because if they come and force, we will shoot it out. You'll have a bloodbath you can't even begin to imagine.
Yep.
You know we've been trained. You know we've got guns. You know, yeah, I know. I said, as far as I know, there's not a warrant on Jim. I said, but if there is, you know, please come see me first.
Yeah.
I don't want people to be, you know. It's okay. Well, April, arrest warrant comes down on Jim. This is February warrant. 2 months later, the guy comes and sees me privately. Comes to the property. He says, I do have an arrest warrant for Jim on weapons charge. Will you get himself up? I go talk to Jim. Jim says, no. I'm not going to get myself up. I want to pray about it tonight. The sergeant says, you know what this means? You know, if he doesn't surrender tomorrow, the feds are going to be here. It will surround your property. You know, you'll have a standoff. I said, yeah, I get it. And he said, Kerry, this is serious. I said, man, believe me, I get it. I know. I don't want a shootout. Believe me. Well, Jim decides he's not going to surrender. Then the day after that, we have 300 police officers from federal, state, and local surrounding our property, you know, try to issue a warrant on Jim. Well, by this point, we're harboring some fugitives from the order. Now, this started on April 19th of 1985. In this country, April 19th is known as Patriots' Day. It was the day that supposed Revolutionary War kind of started. It was also the day, 8 years later, that the Branch Davidian fire happened. 2 years after that, it's the day of the Oklahoma City bombing. So April 19th was significant, right? But some of those people from the order were Nazis, and April 20th is Hitler's birthday. So they really wanted to shoot it out on the 20th. And on the 20th, I didn't think I was going to be able to pull this off. I really thought we were going to end up shooting it out. So I'm going around saying goodbye to my friends in there. Well, fortunately, what happened on the 19th, when I go down to see, now I'm the negotiator. Jim sends me out there to find out what's going on. So instead of army fatigues and camouflage, I put on regular civilian clothes, and I go out, walk out, because we can see snipers all around us.
Oh, my God.
And I head out to where some of the snipers are. You know, got my hands up, don't shoot me. And I get, a few feet from the sniper. He says, stop right there. I said, look, what are y'all doing? What's this all about? And he said, are you willing to go down and talk to our commander? I said, yeah, which was down in one of our outlining settlements that I was in, my settlement. I said, yeah, I'll go down there, which is about a quarter mile down the road. So I can see, when I'm going down this road, I can see all of these law enforcement agents with their guns on me. And I got my hands up, please don't shoot me. And of course, what's going through my mind is if I move wrong, I'm dead. They're just shooting me to death.
Yeah.
But I get down there, and I'm shaking like a leaf. And I get down there, and the head of the FBI SWAT team, which is called the Hostage Rescue Team, he was the founder. They made him the negotiator. Usually it's two different people, but he's doing both roles. And he comes up and introduces himself to me. And I really like him right off the bat. That was good. He pulled me aside. He said, look, we're not here to shoot it out. I want you to really, really, really understand me. We will never fire the first shot. But I'm here to arrest your leader. But if y'all shoot the first shot, I've got a Huey helicopter over the hill. I've got a tank down the hill.
Oh, my goodness.
I got a 50 caliber machine gun on top of another hill. If y'all fire one shot, all of those will go into action, and we will level your place until every man, woman, and child within 30 seconds.
Yeah, all the children.
Everybody. Because we had gathered everybody from the other two settlements into the main settlement.
Right.
So if war started, there's no way to protect it.
Like sitting ducks.
In fact, we were letting the kids run wild in the yards because we figured, well, the kids are out and the women, they're not going to shoot at us, right? But he made it real clear. We do not want to kill anybody. But you started, we're going to end it real fast.
Right.
I said, well, that's not what I want. I want this thing peacefully. Jim has sent me down there to stall so that the other guys can get ready for war. I'm down there, unknown to Jim, for peaceful resolution of this whole thing. Because nobody, not even my wife, knew that I had talked to this Arkansas State police officer back in February. So Danny Colson was the FBI guy. We got to talking, and we had some camaraderie. On the second day, like I said, I thought we were going to shoot out because of the guys that were Nazis and wanting Hitler's birthday.
Yeah.
The day that we did it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, then later on that evening, I'm down with Danny and we hear a shot. And of course, Danny gets on his phones immediately, finds out what's going on. And come to find out, a local cop actually fired one of his pistol. Of course, I'm running back up to let everybody know that find out one of our guys got shot. So that almost started it. But fortunately, nobody got. We didn't start anything on the second day. We made it through the second day. Now we're coming to the third day. Third day happens, and Jim wants to go down and meet Danny Colson to kind of see what he's like, what kind of character he is.
Yeah.
So I go, and then he wants, of course, to come back up. So I can go down and I tell Danny what Jim wants. He said, I can't do that. I got to arrest one. This guy comes within our thing. For me, I got to arrest him. That's what this is all about.
Mm-hmm.
I said, look, Danny, what's going to happen? He's going to come up here. He's going to talk to you for a few minutes. He's going to go right back where he is right now. What's really changed except that now he sees who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he thinks about it. And he said, okay, first time in FBI history that had ever been done. Right. So Jim comes down and talks to him. And of course, Jim is, he's the general. He's really got his uniform.
Yeah, yeah.
And the profilers with the FBI had told Danny that Jim would never surrender to somebody he did not consider an equal, which was true. They got that right. So Jim comes down and Danny presented himself as almost a general of an army, because he really is.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim is very impressed. He talks to Danny for a while, and then Danny lets him go back. So Jim's impressed. Danny kept his word. I'm impressed. Okay. Huge steps for us. Then I go back up later. Jim says, well, I want Ollie, his wife, come down and meet Danny. So I go down to Danny. Danny says, okay, send her down. Now, Danny's expecting your typical stereotype cult wife.
Yeah.
Cult leader wife. Kind of downtrodden, beaten, being meek, soft-spoken. That's not his wife. Ollie was a very regal woman, very intelligent, very proper, had a presence about her.
Okay, and this is his first wife.
First wife.
Right.
She goes down there and meets Danny. Danny is just floored by her. He admitted that she was not what he expected. And that kind of gave him more respect for Jim in that sense. Ollie meets Danny, talks to him a little while, and then she goes back up. So Ollie has started now trying to talk Jim into surrendering. So besides me, she's the only one. But everybody else wants to go to war. It's just Ollie and I want Jim to surrender. And we keep reiterating, this is what God has done in the past. This is what's happened. We split. We had plans. We got spoiled. I mean, isn't it obvious that we should not be at this point in time?
Yeah.
It should be obvious. By the fourth day, Jim is starting to realize God's not going to open up the earth and swallow up the feds. People from other groups are not coming to us like they said they would to help us out. No miracles are coming. So Jim has to justify in his mind surrendering without losing face to the men. And he ends up being able to tell the men that now God has told him to surrender, that God is going to use him in a different way.
Right.
So, I go down to Danny that Jim's going to surrender. Danny wants all the men to come down before the women and children. He won't allow the women and children to come down first. So the men come down dressed in camouflage uniforms, military 2 lines. Jim is at the front. I'm in the back center. The men are singing one of our war songs on the way down.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. And I'm crying like a baby down because, this is almost over and nobody's died.
Yeah.
So all this pressure awesomely is coming on. The guys get down there. Colson goes up to Jim. He says, "Look, I'm not going to handcuff you in front of your men because I would not want to be handcuffed in front of my men." Took us both by surprise again. Put him in one of the police cars, hauled him off, and when they got to the top of the hill and round where nobody could see him, then he got handcuffed.
Right.
They took the women and kids that we brought down later to town, put everybody up in hotels. Part of our agreement to surrender was that I would be there however long the search for illegal weapons and stuff, for evidence, that I'd be there during the search, mandatory for us. So for the next 4 days, I was there while they were searching the property. Of course, they found a huge amount of evidence, illegal weapons. We had C4, we had a wall rocket.
Wow.
Dynamite, silencers. We had 55-gallon barrel of cyanide, 200-something weapons, and they only found about 2/3 of it. I knew where the other third was, so once it was all over with, and they had let us know, once Jim got arrested, that any man who had any kind of leadership would be arrested the next time the grand jury met in May, so don't go nowhere. So I knew where the rest of the weapons were that were illegal. Last thing I wanted was to go through all of this again. So I approached the government. I said, "Look, the other guys really had nothing to do with all the gun stuff. The guys who were in the paramilitary who left in '83, they were the gun guys. Jim kept the guns, yes, but none of us really wanted the guns. Let the other guys go, and I'll plead to what's in this country is known as misprision of felony, where I knew crimes were being committed and didn't report them because I didn't have the illegal gun, but I didn't want illegal guns. Well, the government said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to charge anybody who had any kind of leadership. So I couldn't work out a deal, but I decided to go ahead and kill the guns anyway because I did not want more trouble down the road. All the weapons, right? Jim was not happy with that. But he was refused bail. He's in jail. It's 40 days after he's got arrested that now me and the other guys get arrested.
Okay.
So he's had 40 days in jail by himself. He's in solitary confinement. I get arrested, and part of the plea bargain agreement for us to surrender was if I get arrested, I get to be in the same cell as Jim. So we're together. They agreed to that. So they put us in the same cell. The next step was revolutionary for me because Jim never said, "How are you doing? How's everybody else? What's going on?" Nothing.
Yeah.
First thing he did when I get there, he gives me this list. He says, "Look, I'm cooperating with the government to bring down the other leaders of the right-wing movement. And I've read a bunch of notes of people I've met when and what was talked about, and I need for you to collaborate everything." So here's the guy who said if we ever surrendered or ran from the government, he'd shoot us in the back, has been in jail now for 40 days and has already started working out a deal to turn evidence against the other leaders. So now this is what he believes God really wants him to do. And he says, "You were right all along. I was wrong. So let's do this." So I look at the list, at least half of it was just lies. And the other half, I said, "Yeah, Jim, I recognize the dates of the people." I said, "But I wasn't here. This is stuff you told me about." but I wasn't there.
Yeah.
Hardly any of this stuff, right? I said, I'm not going to be good at that. He said, just believe me, the government wants this to happen. So Jim, in the meantime, they put more charges on him. He goes to trial for racketeering. He's found guilty, gets 20-year sentence.
Right.
By cooperating, he could get his sentence reduced. But it's going to be, that was in the May I got arrested. So in June, we're doing this. By July, the government has already offered me a deal. If you'll turn state's evidence against Jim, you won't do prison time. Chances are we'll drop the charges. You'll move back to Texas.
Right.
And, I said, no, I won't testify against Jim. I'm not going to do that. Jim's done more to me than anybody on this planet. In spite of all the bad stuff.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I'll move back to Texas, but I'm not going to testify. And he said, okay, you don't have to testify, but and we won't argue probation when you'll plead guilty to conspiracy to possess unregistered weapons, which was a 5-year max. I was facing, at 21 charges, was facing 210 years if they stacked one on top of each other, which they rarely do.
Say that again. Charges against you personally, 210 years?
210 years for me.
Oh, my goodness.
They charged me with actually possessing 21 different illegal weapons, none of which I ever possessed, because I didn't want them. I never had an illegal automatic machine gun in my house. Never. Only shot one time. Didn't like it. But they were going to charge me.
Right.
Because I'm number 2 guy, right?
Yeah.
So they offered me a plea bargain that you'll plead down to conspiracy. It's got a 5-year max. I knew I was facing, if I went to trial, I'd get the match just like Jim did with racketeering, and I'd get 10 years. They wouldn't stack them. They would just put them all together.
Yeah.
And I'd get 10 years.
Right.
I don't want to spend 10 years in prison.
No.
At this point, I'm tired. I don't want to be in the movement any longer. I just want out of I want the nightmare over with.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I'll take the 5 years. So I go back and I tell Jim and the other guys that I'm taking a plea bargain. Jim and I are in what they call an exercise room by ourselves. I tell him. He said, look, here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell the government that all these years you were the power behind the thing. You had something on me and you were blackmailing me for this. And even though I was the front person, you really had all the power.
What?
So that I can go back to the farm and keep CSA going. I said, no, way in the world. Now this, can you tell Casey how hard this hit me? Here's a man that I pretty much idolized. Thought was, for quite a bit of time, thought was perfect as a man of God on this earth. Telling me now to lie to the government so that I take the blame, I go to prison so that he can go back and keep the group together. I said, I'm not doing it. I said, first of all, it's not true. I would never do it. Second of all, the government would never believe it. And third of all, I can't even believe you're asking me to do this.
Yeah, and not just that, so that he can go back to the farm and run it how? With guns and wives and...
He'd have to start on over from scratch, doing the whole thing. So, I said, no, I can't do it. So he looks at me and says, so you're going to betray me. And I was so stunned, Casey, that I had to turn away and look at the window and cry. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, betray you? I could have already betrayed you.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was just thinking. That if I wanted to betray you,
yeah, I could testify that you were an accessory to murder. And you would spend the rest of your life in prison. I got stuff on you nobody else has. So, betray you? No, I'm not betraying you. You're betraying me. And it woke me up to the kind of man that he had now become. The cult leader exposed. And of course, now we're on the outs even more. So
Oh my goodness, that must just, oh.
It was horrible. It was horrible. It was the lowest I had ever been in my life. I'm separated from my wife and kids. I don't get bail. I'm there without bail, so I can't get out. Still another 2 months before sentencing that I got away with this guy.
Yeah.
And it was just, I hated it. We went to the sentencing. The government agreed not to argue probation. I was hoping, first offense. I helped on the negotiations. I turned all the rest of the guns over. I mean, I did, in my point of view, I went far beyond what it would take for some leniency in this. So I was really hoping I was willing to go back to Texas. But I walked in there and I knew right off the bat I was not going to leave and go home that day.
Right.
And I got 5 years sentence, the maximum. So I was taken to jail and then taken to prison.
Kerry, what a wild thing you've just told me. Like, and the listeners can't see, but I've spent most of your story like watching the screen through my fingers, because I just could not comprehend the direction that things were going in. And how long of a sentence did Jim end up serving?
Jim again?
Yeah, how long of a sentence did Jim actually end up serving?
He got a 20-year sentence originally, then he got a 10-year sentence on weapons. Once he turned state's evidence and agreed to testify, they had what they called a sedition trial in 1988 against the leaders of the right-wing movement.
Right.
He did testify against them, and it was agreed no matter what the outcome, he'd get his sentence reduced in half. So it was reduced to a 10-year sentence, and he did almost 9 years.
Right. Okay. And you mentioned in your emails to me that CSA disbanded in 86 because most of the men were arrested. The women couldn't.
The men were all gone. There was just the women that were being helped by some neighbors and other groups that we had met. But once they couldn't pay the payments on the property, utilities, that kind of stuff, women just said, we got to leave, and they abandoned the property sometime in 86.
And what was prison like for you? I mean, what kind of other inmates were you around? People of similar kind of sentences or completely different? Were people fascinated by your story?
Oh, I didn't tell a story in prison.
Right. Okay.
No, you don't do that. You'll never hear somebody's story in prison. Not
right.
Me, state, but people pretty much keep to themselves. So I'm federal. I'm not state.
Okay.
Obviously, I've never been in jail a day in my life, so I don't know what to expect. But I'm a big movie fan in those days. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of movies. So first day in jail was bad enough. The first day in prison, everybody seemed like they were 10 feet tall. And I'm going between these two rows of convicts in there. And it was scary. It was scary. I'll admit it. This was not where I wanted to be. But when you first go into federal, you're designated by the category of crime that you do. So you have minimum, medium, and maximum prisons in the federal system. So I was classified a minimum, medium.
Right.
Between the first two, right? So I had to start out with a medium, knowing that over time, if I behaved, I'd go to a minimum security, right? So I'm in with people who have not necessarily similar types of crimes, but similar sentences.
Yeah.
Non-violent. A lot of drugs, of course, those kind of people. Bank robbers. I was in with some politicians, that kind of thing. but nobody violent. I was considered non-violent. So I was in medium to start off with. After a few months there, then I was taken to minimum, which they called a camp. No fences. You could wear your own clothes instead of prison clothes, that kind of thing. So, it started getting nice. I got to the point where I could have a furlough with my wife and kids. So that got okay. And then FBI came to see me and told me that Jim was going to testify against the movement, and they wanted me to testify also. I said, no, thank you. I'm doing my time. I want to forget everything, go off my life. And they said, you don't understand. If you don't do this, then you're going to get charged as part of the right-wing movement, and you could be facing life in prison like some of those guys are. I said, you're right, I didn't understand. But now I understand. So I don't have too much of a choice. So I had to end up testifying at the sedition trial also. Wasn't very good at my testimony because I didn't know too often much as far as what wasn't on with the other people that Jim knew about. By the time the sedition trial had come, I was already out of prison. I already served time. Got out a little early because I was cooperating with the government. So I'd already been out for about 6 or 7 months by this point. Jim got his sentence reduced in half. Life kind of went on. I was a little scared of retribution against me for testifying, but never had any threats against me or my family. Came back, had come back to society and already had a job, and the life just kind of went on. I had to try to straighten out everything. It took me, I started turning around in 83, and it took me till 1992 to sort stuff out in my head, especially the theology stuff. That was hard. I had to put my Bible down for a couple of years because I couldn't read scriptures without thinking of it from a Christian identity point of view or racist point of view. So it took me a while to get that part out of my system. I started speaking out against hate and violence in 1990. 95, of course, we had the Oklahoma City bombing. Shortly after that, 3 years after that, I wrote my first book explaining the whole thing about what the right-wing movement is all about. I'm doing public speaking stuff at law enforcement conferences, human rights conferences, civil rights, that kind of thing, to help people understand, the theology and philosophy and mentality of right-wing people. When I came out, there was only, I think there was 4 of us in those days who'd gotten out of the movement that were speaking out. So we were very few, and nobody had experienced what I had. Nobody had been in the armed standoff or, community, done any kind of dangerous plots like we had done. So I was unique in that. So I got invited to a lot of terrorist conferences to talk about how dangerous the right-wing movement can be.
And you've written a second book since your first book as well.
I wrote a second book, 2008, 10 years later, that told the same story in a shorter version, but I did a lot of, here's what I learned at this particular stage.
Yeah.
Here's what happened. Now looking back years later, this is what I see as what God was doing and how I learned from that experience. So that my point of the second one was, if you've done something, made a major mistake in your life, and you think God is forsaking you, or you think you'll never recover, read my story and the lessons I learned and how you can apply that to your life.
Right. Okay. So it sounds like a good resource potentially for people who have been caught up in their own high controlling groups.
Yeah.
So would you just like to let the listeners know what the name of those 2 books are and where they can find them?
The first book is called Tabernacle of Hate, Seduction into Right-Wing Extremism. It's available on Amazon. It's published by Syracuse University Press. They did a marvelous, marvelous job on it. And it's got, it was updated from the first edition. And plus I added 2 booklets, propaganda booklets that I wrote in CSA days that kind of explain more of the background stuff. So it's a very good educational source as well. Second book is called Tabernacle of Hope, Bridging Your Darkened Past Toward a Brighter Future.
Mm-hmm.
That one I self-publish. It's available through me. If they'll go to my Facebook page is under Noble Consulting on Facebook.
Yep.
Then they can find the information there.
Yep.
Contact.
I'll also post a link into the episode description to the Amazon book and the self-published book and the Facebook page as well. For anybody that'd be interested in finding out more. And one thing I found was really interesting, which I think I mentioned to you in my emails, that when I Googled your name just to see what would come up, it was a headline from a Stephen Hassan article on his website, Freedom of Mind, that says Kerry Noble, former leader in one of the first American white supremacy survivalist cults. So when I read that title on a cult expert's website, I was thinking, who is this person I'm going to speak to, and what on earth is their story going to sound like? And I just am in absolute awe of the journey that you've been on. And
that's a little unique.
It's definitely unique, but I think it feels like you've come full circle. I mean, what would you say to yourself now if you could speak to your 24-year-old self who's just rocking up to this commune? You know,
I would tell my 24-year-old self, stick around for a year, maybe 15 months, and get out.
Take those experiences and apply them somewhere else.
First year where it was really good, and then get out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Part of what I had to reconcile within myself was anytime that you go through this, and you know this, talking to other cult people, you get to the point where you have to accept personal responsibility.
Absolutely, yeah.
A lot of the steps that we took because of me. Not more me sometimes than Jim. You know, I brought the John Todd tape. I could have listened to the John Todd tape and thrown it away.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim had never heard it, and we might not have ever bought a single gun. Right? Jim brought us the cassette tape on Christian identity, and it was up to me to study it to see its validity. And I could have said, no, this is false doctrine.
Yeah.
Rubbish. And I didn't do it because I became a yes man for Jim. I could said no to the polygamy thing and tried to dissuade him from it. So many times I could have stood up and said, Jim, this is wrong. I could have pushed further in 83 when I got the revelation of the goodness of man instead of the evilness of man.
Mm-hmm.
But I was still intimidated by Jim. I was still afraid that I was missing God if I turned against Jim.
Yeah.
That was a serious thing for me. You know that from any kind of cult experiences people go through, they have to face that. So owning up to my responsibility that a lot of this was my fault.
Yeah.
It's hard to do.
And
so once I got to that point.
Is that kind of what you meant when you said that you had to take, kind of a few years up until sort of 92 to reflect on all of that and come to some type of realization within yourself? I mean, how have you come on a journey? Have you managed to forgive yourself?
I finally, that took a while. You know that from cult people. What happened for me was, when I got out in 90 and I started speaking out, or got out of prison in 90, I started speaking out. Every time I spoke, of course, that helps in the healing process. Then I start writing the book, that helps in the healing process. I also joined an organization called Toastmasters International. Are you familiar with them?
No.
Okay, Toastmasters is a public speaking organization.
Right.
Where you learn to get in front of people and speak professionally. I didn't have any trouble speaking in front of people. I've been doing that for years and years. But so you're not critiqued on what you talk about, the content. You're critiqued on how well you speak. You do too many ahs and ums and that kind of stuff, right? That's what you're critiqued on. So I was in Toastmasters for 10 years. In those 10 years, 90% of my speeches were about CSA dates.
Mm-hmm.
So it gave me, years later, I told the group that they were my psychological savior because it gave me a chance to talk about stuff with no judgment.
Right.
Right. There was a Jewish man in our in our local club that him and I became real good friends. I had opened up to the ADL in those days, was in touch with the local ADL office. They helped me to understand some Jewish aspects of stuff. I'd gone to a synagogue meeting. I'd studied Hebrew under a rabbi. So there were a lot of things that kind of helped me in my healing from outsiders along the way. And I did forget, I know we've been on here for a long time, because I didn't tell you how bad it got. Which I don't know if you know about the gay church bombing?
I don't know. Well, over here we hear a lot about all
you don't know
types
anything
of
about this.
Right.
And I should have said this earlier. I'll put out there pretty quick for you. In 1984, I told you, this is after the health food store shut down.
Okay.
Jim and I were arguing a lot over polygamy issues, and it wore me down. I wanted to leave the group by that point, but my wife didn't want to leave at that point.
Right.
So I said, okay, we'll stick around. So Jim and I were at such odds. There's a thing that's common with a lot of cults. We called it earning your place in the kingdom. I don't know what other cults may call it, but it's a similar kind of thing.
Okay.
You earn a position in the kingdom of God, right? And I believe that I had to appease myself with Jim in order to maintain my position in the kingdom of God.
Okay.
So I volunteered for a mission. We had heard a news report on the news of a park in Kansas City, Missouri that had become a gay park.
Right.
And on weekends, especially Saturday nights, gays would go there and meet. So I said, have our munitions get me a silenced weapon.
Oh gosh.
I'll go up this. Now this is the scariest part of the journey, so be prepared. That I'll go up there and I'll circle this park. One of the guys in our group was from Kansas City, so he went with me because he knew his way around. I'd never been. I said, I'll go around this park and I'll shoot who's ever in the park.
Oh, Kerry. Oh my gosh.
And then, and I had to build me a briefcase bomb with C4 in it, military explosives. And I would take it to a large adult bookstore and I'd blow up the bookstore, right? Because Jim, obviously, homosexuals in those days we considered, the epitome of anti-God, and we considered the pornography industry as anti-God. So these would be two symbols to the other groups across the country. So the guy and I leave on Saturday evening it's about a 4-hour drive to Kansas City. We get at the park around 10 o'clock, between 10 and 11. And we drove around that park half dozen times. Never saw anybody. And he's driving. I've got the window down. I've got the gun. All I got to do is see somebody and shoot. That's it. Nobody'd even hear it. The silencer was very quiet.
Oh my gosh.
But nobody, right?
Thank goodness.
So I said, okay, so let's find an adult bookstore and we'll do the bomb there. So we found a pretty good sized adult bookstore finally. I tell him to stay in the car. I'll take the briefcase in, go to the back somewhere, set the timer, walk out. 5 minutes later, boom. So I walk into this adult bookstore. The clerk behind the desk says, come on in, but you can't take the briefcase in with you. Well, okay. That makes sense because obviously if I'm taking a briefcase, they think I might try to steal some magazines or adult videos or whatever.
Right.
So he says, you can leave it with me and then pick it up when you come back. I said, well, I don't want to do that. I'll just take it back after the car. So I take it back up to the car and don't know what to do now. Obviously, I don't want to go back in there with the bomb. So we stay Saturday night. We get up Sunday. He says, well, let me take you where I grew up in church. It's okay. So we drove up to this church. I said, are you sure? He said, yeah. I said, well, it's not your church no more. I mean, it's a Metropolitan Community Church, which was the gay church in America in those days, the number one gay church. He said, your church is full of homosexuals. So we looked at each other and said, maybe this is what God wants.
Oh, gosh. Oh, this is awful.
So you thought the story was bad.
Oh.
So we walk in there with the briefcase. I'm carrying the briefcase. Of course, they think we're just two gay guys coming in there. Now, we don't know what to expect. Obviously, neither one of us has been in a gay church. We're the stereotype that we've always sort of been programmed with over the last few years is sexual orgy and all that kind of stuff. We walk in there, and it's different in the sense that the women are on one side and the men are on a different side of the aisle. But that's pretty much, there's some hand holding, arm around shoulders, that kind of stuff, but nothing major. The pastor comes out, starts talking about announcements, talks about his sexual relationships with the music director. Of course, there's no such thing as gay marriage in those days.
Right.
So this is more and more looking like what we're supposed to do.
Oh.
I'll get the briefcase under the pew. All I got to do is just barely open it, flip the switch, we leave. 50, 60 people. This would have been the largest domestic terrorism act in the United States history. I was this close.
Oh, God.
So one thing that you're taught military-wise is never put a face on the enemy. You have to dehumanize the enemy, which we have been doing with stereotypes and everything for several years. I've never been around homosexuals at all in my life. Never been around a Jewish man in my life. So stereotypes are a little bit easier for them. I'd been around blacks. That was a bigger issue for me because I had black friends before I ever moved to Arkansas. But I'm sitting here, and it's hard not to put a face on the enemy because I'm sitting right there looking at the enemy.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting realizing, first of all, these people look no different than I do.
No. And when you say you've never been around a homosexual before, like, how do you know, really?
How do you know? Unless they tell you or try to accost you or something, how would you know? So I'm looking around. I mean, they're just people. Nobody, looks out of the ordinary, right? So then I take the next step and I start thinking about these people have never hurt me. They've never hurt my family, my friends. They've never done anything to me.
Gosh.
And here I am sitting just seconds apart from killing people who, as far as I know, have never even hurt anybody, right? And then the next step I take is looking at the consequences, which obviously you're not supposed to do. And in the cults, you have a cult mentality. There's a certain point in time where you quit thinking logically.
Yep.
And until you can get the cobwebs out and you can start thinking. So you don't think in terms of consequences, or ramifications of your actions for down the road. You just don't do that after a certain point in time. So for the first time in probably 3 years or more, I'm sitting there starting to question the consequences. What will happen if I do this?
Yep.
Is the other groups going to really rise up and follow suit? We have war in this country, or is it more likely that I will do this, then I will either get arrested and spend the rest of my life in prison, go to death row, or shoot it out in some sort of a shootout with the cops?
No.
Neither of which obviously appeal to me.
No.
And then, Casey, the fourth step happened. And this is what changed everything for me. The music started. Music, of course, is an integral part of our church service, just like it is everywhere, right? And the church music starts, and I'm watching these people, and they start doing things that I did, that we did in our church services. Close the eyes, lift the hands, start praising God. And it hit me all of a sudden that these people are no different than I am.
No.
They're trying to find their place excuse me, this part hits you sometimes. They're just trying to find their place in God.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I was trying to find my place again in God. So now I'm identifying with them.
Yep.
At least to become homosexuals. Now they're me. Now they're Christians. And the scripture that came to my mind was, draw nigh to God, and God draws nigh to you.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say unless you're a homosexual. It doesn't say unless you're black or Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. You draw nigh to God, God draws near to you. Period. That's the promise.
Yep.
So I'm looking at these homosexuals who have now ceased to be homosexuals. And I know in my heart that as they're calling out to God, God is drawing near to them. I can't kill Christians. So I pick up the briefcase and I tell my friend, we're leaving. So we leave. I get out to the car, explain to him what I believe happened to me. And he said, good, because I didn't think we were supposed to do this either. So he had changed.
Oh my goodness. And those people will never know what.
They never do.
Oh my.
Now they knew, they found out years later, but they never knew at that point.
That's terrifying.
And then we drive back to CSA. Jim and the other men are watching TV because they, for all night and all day, they've been waiting for some news report of what has happened. I walk in, left the briefcase out in the vehicle because I don't want to carry to Jim's house. Jim says, what's going on? And I explained it to him. And Jim looks at me in front of all men and says, you're a coward. And, I just took it. And at that point, I'm ready to go. The whole way back to CSA, I'm praying to God, I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving. I'm taking my wife and the kids.
Yeah.
And I believe that I heard the Lord talk to me and just say, you can't go. You have to stay. And I was not happy with it. And I prayed about it all the time. I want to go. I want to go. You can't go. You can't go. So Jim and I are now arguing constantly.
Listen.
I'll try to get the group to go back to where we used to. Jim and I are button heads. This was in 84. Shortly after that is when I met the ATF agent and the sergeant at the Arkansas State Police.
Yeah.
And then I realized, of course, once we had the siege, the reason I couldn't leave was because there would never been a negotiator, and Jim and I shot it down. He would have. Because I wouldn't have been there to prevent it. So I had to end up going to prison for something I didn't do in order to save lives, which was fine.
Do you feel like that time that you spent in prison is kind of like a sentencing for your involvement in things like bringing the tape to the group in the first place, for not standing up against the polygamy, things like that?
Yeah, I think it was a huge part of for not standing up like I should have stood up. Because whatever we do, whatever we sow, we reap some way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So even though you didn't own the weapons or kind of have much to do with the weaponry itself, you were complicit in the other things that were happening within the group. So it's almost like that's what you served your sentence for. Yeah.
No, honestly, I went to prison for something I didn't do, which was the guns. But there were stuff I did that they didn't know about. And the government never knew ahead of time about the murder building plans or the assassination on the
judge.
Absolutely.
Oh God,
they didn't know about that when we got arrested. They found out about that later.
And conspiracy to commit murder, I suppose, is many more years than 10-year sentence.
Yeah. By the time they found out about it, part of my plea bargaining agreement was I would never be charged for anything previous to my plea bargain.
Right.
The only charge I would have was conspiracy to possess unregistered weapons. If the government ever found out about anything else, I would not be charged. So years later, once I'd served all my time and I'd gotten out and I had done the sedition trial, then I was able to publicly let the authorities know. I started talking about it when I did the terrorism conferences.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing, to let them understand how close somebody like me could get. Because part of the main reason for writing the first book is how does your average guy at point A get to point Z?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was a pacifist. My mom raised me anti-violence, anti-racism, anti-gun. And to get from that childhood to 1984, where I almost committed the largest domestic terror act in this country at that point, how do you get to that point? That was part of the purpose of the first book, the main purpose, besides, my healing.
Yeah.
So, to be honest, it was a struggle. It was a struggle for me to own up to everything and to sort of forgive the prison time, see it as a healing time for me, to forgive myself, forgive Jim eventually. Those took a lot of years. It took all the way till 2004 before I could forgive Jim.
And what about your faith? Where does that stand now?
Stronger than ever. It's funny thing, I never lost my faith. It just got better and better. Because I was already looking, by the time of the siege, I was looking back and knowing and believing where God tried to stop us.
Yeah.
Tried to get us to go back. So I understood the signs. I understood the grace of God in it. And I understood that certain point that you sort of cross the line and it's not the grace is too late, but that you sort of missed the opening kind of thing. And I knew that it was good for me. I spent 3 months in solitary confinement in prison, in a cell, completely by myself. I could get out 3 times a week for an hour, and that was it. This time I'm in solitary confinement. Solitary confinement broke me. The only thing that saved me through solitary confinement was I could call my wife every day. And there was one day I talked to her. My wife was not having a good time with the kids. She was having a lot of trouble. We had 6 children.
Wow.
So she was having a hard day. And I got off the phone and I just screamed at God. I cussed God.
Is it?
F's this and F's that. And then I fell to pieces. Then I fell down to the floor and just wept. And, it was very familiar term. I think it's called the dark night of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
That was my dark night of the soul. That was my stripping of all my pride.
But I suppose you had to get to that point to be able to rebuild to where you are today.
You do. You have to get to that point at some point in time.
Mm-hmm.
That was mine. And once I got to that point, I did a little bit longer, till the solitary confinement was over. I still did another 4 months in prison, outside, before I got to come home.
Yeah.
But it was easier. I was ready to get home. I had to rebuild my family, of course. My 2 younger children in Hollywood. So I had to rebuild my relationship, and the older children, and prove that I wasn't the same guy that they had come to know,
And what does your relationship look like now with your wife and children?
Oh, it's great. We have a great.
Yeah.
My wife and I have been married for 48 years in September. 6 kids have grown, of course. We got 8 grandchildren.
Wow.
Very, very tight family. I will let you know this. Another part of my uniqueness in this whole story. I came home from prison. I set my kids down. My oldest one was 10 when we got busted. So she's 12 years old now when I get home, almost 13. So I set them all down and I said, look, y'all, Mom's told you something about my past. I was in prison, obviously. I filled in some of the blanks that they didn't know about. I said, I am here to tell you, I don't care if your friend, what color they are. I don't care what church they go to. I don't care if they believe in God or not. None of that is important to me. If they're your friend, they're welcome over here. I want you to understand that from the beginning. I will never turn away any of your friends, no matter what. Now, I will tell you this. I expect you to have more of an influence on those children, on your friends, than your friends have on you. Because I know how I'm raising you. I don't know how they're doing. So I do expect you to be a better influence. And I've got, now my kids are grown, married. I've got 2 sons and 4 daughters. My oldest daughter married a white guy. The older son married a white woman. They're bikers. Tattoos all over. Tattoos with a passion, right? But he's my biker son. You know, he's sort of my alter ego from when I was a kid.
Right, yeah.
My third child's a daughter. She's married to an African-American man that I just love with all my heart. I have a African-American grandson. I've got my next one is a daughter. She married a half Hispanic, half Native American.
Okay.
So I've got 3 grandchildren with them. So both of those heritages are there. My next daughter, or my next one's a son. He's married to a woman from Kenya, black woman. Got a black grandson with him. And my youngest one has got a daughter married to a white guy. But so, you know, I've got some diversity in my family.
Absolutely, yeah.
When I used to speak at conferences before my younger 2 got married, I'd tell them the story, and I'd say, you know, I'm pretty much expecting my younger son to marry an Asian girl, and my daughter tell me she's lesbian, and then I've got a whole rainbow coalition in my house, you know. So, you know, it's kind of, you know, it's turned out good for that. Danny Colson that I told you about before, him and I became friends in 95. You know, he's the FBI agent that was in charge of the operation. Him and I have become extremely good friends. Jack Knox, who was the FBI agent that we targeted in 83.
Yeah.
When the siege happened, he wanted all the women arrested on charges also. Prosecuting attorney that we had targeted said, no, I'm not charging women that are politically suicide for me.
Right, yeah.
Jack Knox ended up befriending so many of the women and the men from our group, helping the women to move away from the farm, to helping men when some of the guys got real short sentences. So when they got out, he'd help them, got reestablished. It became so emotional for him, he had to retire from the FBI.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I can kind of get that.
So there was a lot of ironic stuff. The ATF agent I met in 84, him and I are good friends today. Have been for a long time. Things that, like you were talking about, the full circle.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
These are really very full circle, you know, that, and now all that happened in my life to where I could forgive myself, trust myself again. And my faith is just better than ever.
So you still have
I'm extremely grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. You still have a strong connection to God, but you've also managed to take accountability for everything that you were a part of during your time in the movement. Wow, that is, Kerry, I've never heard anything like that in my entire life, what you've just told me there. That is like something you read in a fiction book. And that's your lived
Well, you can read it in a nonfiction book. I wrote one.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate that for the listeners. Tabernacle of Hate, Seduction into Right-Wing Extremism is available on Amazon, and the self-published Tabernacle of Hope, Bridging Your Darkened Past Towards a Brighter Future, is something that I will link to in the show description for anybody that would be interested in reading further. I mean, we've been speaking for nearly 3 hours, but I imagine there's such a wealth of information that's included in in especially the first book that we haven't managed to go over today.
Yeah.
So probably definitely still worth a read for anybody who kind of wants to know a bit more. I just can't.
The second book is good for people who come out of cults also, who come out of bad situations. It's a good book for them to sort of understand some steps that they can take to be able to forgive themselves. Because it's difficult when you come out of groups like this.
Yep.
Learn and trust yourself again.
The second book sounds particularly prevalent or, well, particularly relevant for members of groups who have potentially proselytized and brought people into a movement that's been highly controlling, you know, and then leaving the movement and still having those people that you've brought in involved in a movement that you then consider like highly coercive or manipulative or a cult, you know, and then you move away from the movement and still have that. But I brought people into this and they're still in it. And that's my responsibility. And that's almost my fault that they're there. So that second book sounds like a really good piece of reading material for people that might be struggling with those kinds of thoughts and feelings.
Right.
But I can't thank you enough, Kerry, for coming and telling me your story. There are so many things in that we've gone through, that we've explored, that a lot of people would never own up to and never admit to. So I can't imagine how much you must have had to speak about this and how much work you have to have done on yourself to be able to come here and just say, like, I sat in a church once with a homemade bomb. That is just so wild to me. But I think it's kind of commendable that you can come and speak so openly about those experiences that you've had. I mean, I guess my last question to you before I ask you if there's anything you think we've missed is, are you still in touch with Jim, or when was the last time you spoke to him?
Jim passed away, it was March 27th, so a couple of weeks back.
Right. Oh, okay.
The last time I talked to Jim was in 2007. My wife and I were meeting a couple or three other couples from our old days. We did invite Jim. Jim found out about it and kind of crashed the party.
Right. Okay.
Stayed the whole time. And I told Jim at that meeting in 2007, that I had forgiven him. My wife said she forgave him. It was the only time that he ever apologized to me.
Right. Okay. Wow.
And then I saw him again in 2016 when one of our core members passed away, and there was a memorial for him. A lot of us from the group went to that memorial. Jim was there. By that point, Jim was already in a wheelchair. He was getting arthritis real bad. He'd broken a hip. And he was up in age. There was a 2016, so 5 years ago, so he was 75 then. And then he got, first part of this year, he was diagnosed with congestive heart failure, was put into hospice, and then he passed away in March.
And how did that make you feel when you found out that he'd passed away?
Part of it was, Jim was not in a good physical place.
No.
He didn't remember a lot of stuff. He had a lot of physical pain. It was hard for him to get out of bed. So from a merciful point of view, it was good that he passed away. He really didn't have that much quality of life left. It was also, for me, it was significant. The day that he died was the first day of Passover.
Right.
Passover was a very spiritual time for us at our group. I saw that as a kind of a good sign from God, to be honest, that it was time for Jim to pass over to the other side. That everything was okay. Now he's not having pain. he never renounced his belief system. He never publicly said he was sorry. In fact, he publicly would say, I have nothing to be sorry about. I did what I
Right.
wanted.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So he never got to that point. He never owned up to anything.
No.
But the fact that he apologized to the few of us that were there in 2007, and we didn't need for him to get into details of what he was apologizing for. He said, I'm sorry for how things turned out.
Yeah. Yeah.
We appreciate that. We had grown past that by that point. Jim had 4 wives in his whole life and something like 18 kids.
Wow.
And the sad part for Jim is most of his children ended up not really want to be around him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They were upset with him over everything that he did.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I felt bad for him on that. He wasn't able to have the good family get together after prison that I was able to.
Yeah.
His wives divorced, all of his wives ended up divorcing.
But from what you've said, like your belief system and approaches to everything were just different. And I can't imagine that he would have come forward and said to his children, like, love who you want to love and spend time with who you want to spend time with. It doesn't bother me. Like, the approach that you had after you came out of prison, I can't imagine he had that same approach.
No. And it for me, I'm more introspective than Jim ever was. So realizing that I had to take ownership, realizing that I'm a very strong believer that all things work together for good, that all things, will turn out okay. They have for me. So, it was difficult for me to, for the pride to get crushed.
Yeah.
I could
yeah.
talk about it without self-condemnation, self-judgment, and fearing that what other people would think, because, no matter who I've talked to, everybody's understanding. I've never had anybody, say bad stuff to me after they hear my story.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's
Just never got to that point.
No, it doesn't sound that way.
He was wrong.
And I'm sure that he spent a lot of the sentence that he had in prison angry at other people for things that they had done and not taking a lot of responsibility for himself. Is kind of how I imagined he would have been. Obviously, I didn't know him, but from just what you've said and the way that he tried to get himself out of that situation by putting you in his shoes, kind of gives me that kind of feeling. But what you just said there about not caring what people think is so important for people that are coming out of these high controlling groups and coercive movements. To be able to talk about it and not care what people think is so important. I think so many people hold back on talking about their experiences and having these kind of cathartic moments of speaking through and understanding everything that happened, because they're worried that people will think that they are easily manipulated or have a lower IQ, because how could somebody go from being a 24-year-old guy with a child and a pregnant wife to kind of, going into the adult store with the briefcase? Like, how can that happen to somebody? But, and I always say at the end of these types of interviews that you obviously, you've published 2 books. You're not on the lower IQ. You're not easily manipulated. There's been certain things that it sounds to me as that Jim has done over time, to wear the followers down, and you're being brought these different pieces of doctrine that you've gone away and studied, and you said it took you 6 months before you kind of came around to the idea about the kind of the disbelief in the Jewish and the Hebrew side of things. So it's not like you jumped on board instantly with different people's theologies and things like that. You went away and did your own research and came to your own conclusions. which changed the way that things happened. But it's so important that people can take away from this conversation that it's okay to speak to people about things, and there won't be the judgment that you think there is. There won't be people sitting there thinking, oh, you're so stupid, you're so dumb, how could you let this happen to you? I would never join a cult, I would never be in a group like this. Because from what you've explained to us, everything happens so organically. It just happens. And when you're living in those self-sealing systems, it just happens. And if anything, coming away from that experience and talking about it and talking about it and talking about it in as many different ways as you can, on as many different platforms as you can find, has kind of brought you to this place where you can have these conversations and they don't have the effect on you that they used to have, which I think is really important for the listeners.
Yeah, sometimes it still hits me, you know. I don't know that you can ever escape your past totally.
No.
You know, it's still, you know, when I talk about the gay church, it can get emotional for me.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk, because for me, it's how close I came to losing everything.
Absolutely, yeah.
Even lost my wife, my kids, you know, my life. And now I've got grandchildren that call me Papa. So, you know, when I'm around my grandkids, it makes me even more aware of how important it was that I didn't do the stuff I could have done.
Absolutely, yeah. And we wouldn't be sitting here today having this conversation if things had gone differently. Right. So, you know, I'm really thankful and really grateful for your time today. And I just appreciate you coming here and telling me your story and putting it out into the world for more listeners to access who may not have heard this story before. And for them to now have access to your published titles if they hadn't heard of them before, because more resources are obviously really important in this field. So thank you so much for your time today, Kerry. I really appreciate it, and I really hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Can I ask one more question?
Absolutely.
Do you know what sex your child is?
Yes, she's a girl. She's gonna be a girl born in June.
So you got a boy and a girl?
Yes.
Right? Good for you. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
As somebody with 6 kids, one piece of advice.
Yes.
And I know you already know this. Make all the memories you can with your kids.
Oh, absolutely.
Everyone. Make memories. Kids remember memories more than anything else. And all the good memories that you can do makes them that much straighter.
That's my present. That will be my promise to you as I leave the call today. I'm going to go upstairs and I'm going to give my little boy a kiss goodnight, and then I'm going to go to bed and just appreciate all the kicking around I can feel in my belly at the moment before my little lady is born in a few months' time. So thank you so much, Kerry. I appreciate that. And you take it easy and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.